welcome to We Wine Whenever. I'm Wendy.
I'm Callie.
And I'm Lori.
Today we're talking about the Scott and Laci Peterson case. So we have done a deep dive on this whole new trial thing, the conviction. I watched the Scott Peterson side of it that was on Peacock. Kelly watched the Laci Peterson side that was on Netflix. And Lori has done some... You tell us what you've done, Laura.
I watched the Peacock, Face to Face with Scott Peterson. I did not get to watch the Hulu, The Murder of Laci Peterson, or I did watch the Hulu Nightline, Scott Peterson, The Wrong Man. There was a Netflix, American Murder, Laci Peterson.
That's what I watched.
One I watched. And then watched several episodes of something called True Crime Rocket Science on YouTube, and another person that did a very deep dive on TikTok, and just general online different sources that I kind of went to and read comments and blah, blah, blah. So I think we should have a good all-around picture of the whole situation. But, you know, it's interesting because now there's this whole set of people who don't really know who Scott Peterson is, where to us, it was something that was so prevalent and so engaging at the time that, you know, people our age know exactly what the case was. But now, since this resurgence, there's going to be a whole another set of people who get to look at it from a totally different angle than we did. So
Now,
I think it's just interesting.
I did not realize, I was talking to Tess about it and telling her that we were doing this. I was pregnant. I got pregnant with Tess in February of 2023. I keep doing that. February of 2003, and she went missing in December 2000. So I was pregnant while watching this all play out on the news. I didn't realize it until we started, looking into this.
Right.
And for us too.
I mean, I remember it. I remember hearing about it and watching it on the news every day. I just didn't realize now that I was pregnant at the time.
And now, we have all this internet and all. Back then it was just the news. So when there was a news story on, especially, it was like the perfect storm, their story. It would, it was attractive people. It was a downtime in the news. It was, Christmas time is a downtime. It was a pregnant woman. It was this whole captivating thing that I don't think people from a generation now can really understand what something was like then, because there was not that much to capture your attention. There was the television, and that was it.
Yeah.
And there was like a news talk show on the radio, but that was it. So when something became a big thing, it was a big thing.
Yeah, for sure.
So where did they meet, Laura? Where did Scott and Laci meet?
It's just technological difficulties.
Well, I saw that they met at college.
Yeah. In 1995, they met in college. I guess Scott had received a golf scholarship to Arizona State.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, but he only went for one semester, and he got a girl pregnant whom had an abortion, and then he returned home.
I didn't know any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And he subsequently he attended like 3 different colleges in 4 years. And Laci, in her freshman year, she lived with her boyfriend, Kent, whom she dated in high school, who was emotionally and physiologically abusive. They broke up, and later he tried to stab his next girlfriend in the back and went to prison.
Kent?
Yes.
Kent, yes.
Kent, yes. So, supposedly Scott really loved Bob Laci. So you have to think of it from kind of Laci's perspective. I believe her first boyfriend in high school, before this Kent person, was also kind of manipulative. Then she was involved with this Kent person, and then he ends up, trying to murder someone and goes to jail. So by the time she meets Mr. Wonderful, Scott Peterson, with all his game, definitely it has been said that he definitely bombed her. And their first date,
her three good girlfriends were interviewed in the one that I watched on Netflix, and the one said, we didn't use that term back then, but he definitely bombed her.
Yeah. So Their first date was on a boat, deep sea fishing, which is pretty apropos to how things end. And
For
they were
sure.
married in 97. She graduates before him and gets this dream job in the Bay Area while he stays with these three other single guys on campus. And word on the street is that he already started cheating on her then because they were married but living apart. And Scott wants to stay in this fun college town. It's his, it's his gig. She wanted to move to the Bay Area where she had gotten this job and settle down, start a family. So Scott convinces Laci to move back, and Scott's father gifts him an established location from the family's packing business. But Scott decides to sell this business so that him and Laci can purchase their own sports bar and restaurant called The Shack. So they ran that for a year or so, and then they sold the business, and then they bought their home in Modesto, California.
Is that
And
where Laci was from, Modesto?
I believe that her family was from that area. I know that his
Okay.
mother was tried to be kind of hoity-toity about it and was not thrilled for her golden child to be moving to this farm town of Modesto. But I think kind
Yeah.
of Laci probably put the pressure on and really wanted to move there and settle down. So that's what they
He
ended up
did
doing.
not want kids, right? And she
No, he
did.
did not want kids. No, he did not.
That was established.
Yes. So, around this time when they move back to Modesto is when Scott finds out about his long lost half brother and sister. But that story's for another time, later on in our podcast. But just to give you
Yeah.
context of when things go on. So, he's tried his hand at the restaurant thing. It was very consuming, the restaurant, as restaurants are. He gives in to her and they move back to Modesto. And that's when he finds out about his step siblings. So from there, in 2000 they purchased their home, and in 2001 they both take out insurance policies. So October
Life
20,
insurance?
yeah, yeah. And then going by a timeline, October 24th, that's when
Well, that's
Scott.
not uncommon, though.
It's not uncommon. They
No,
just got
yeah,
no, not
married.
at
I
all.
mean, it's a
Yeah.
smart thing to do.
They purchased a
Yeah.
house. They
Yeah.
were,
And they
knew
Yeah.
that's not
got life
uncommon.
insurance. No, not at all. So then, when do you want to pick up from there?
Before I do, I see also that Laci was a substitute teacher while you have Scott was a traveling salesman for a fertilizer company.
Yes.
So, that's how we find out that, because I didn't know like why they had this warehouse, that
Right.
we're going to later find out about. So
Yeah. First,
go ahead.
he initially sold the big agricultural sprinkler systems that farmers use. And then he segued
Okay.
into the fertilizing end of it. And when he segued into the fertilizing end with it, that's when he got the warehouse.
Okay.
So was it his business? Was he self-employed or did he work for somebody?
No, I
We don't know.
believe he worked for somebody, but he had that facility to store all of his goods that he had to schlep around selling.
Got it.
So
Got it.
in that facility, he did have chemicals. He had his fertilizer.
Okay. So yeah, so I where I started with for Scott's side, the face-to-face with Scott Peterson is that like she said, they were living in Modesto, California, and she went missing when she was 9 months pregnant on December 24th, 2002. He has been in prison since April of 2003 and has not spoken on camera in 21 years until now.
Wow.
Yeah.
On camera, though.
Camera.
Right, but he has given phone interviews. It's not like he's been sitting there and not talking to anybody, but just not on camera.
Right.
Right.
Got
right. It. He regrets not taking the stand. That's one of the things that he regrets. The Innocence Project, which is what has made this such a big deal now, the Innocence Project is working on getting him a new trial, and they're looking for getting discovery and DNA testing that was never received. And Scott does at this time, still today, maintain his innocence.
In regards to that, I just want to put out there, and I think it's very important because I've watched several things so far where they have thrown around that name incorrectly of the Innocence Project, because it is not the Innocence Project. It is the LA Innocence Project, and it is two totally different things. The Innocence Project is a well-established entity. This other LA Innocence Project is not, and I can give you some information on that when you're ready. But I just wanted to put that out there because there was another show that I
No,
watched.
I want to know now.
They
Kim
kept
Kardashian
saying
is part of what?
probably the Innocence Project.
The Innocence Project?
Yeah. So,
And I wonder what Emily Simpson is involved in, because she's involved in it too.
right. So in 2000,
Yeah, the interesting thing is they're all in LA.
Exactly.
Yeah. So in 2024,
I didn't know that there was two different.
yes. And they'll just throw out that Innocence Project on the sly, like not even mentioning that it's a totally separate entity, the LA Innocence Project. They make it sound like it's that
It's
big.
not like just a branch of.
No, it is a totally separate
Like there's an
organization.
Innocence Project, and then there's an LA one, a New
Yes.
York one, a New Jersey. It's not like that. I know
No.
that LA is a city, and New York and New Jersey are states.
No, we get
So
that.
don't come for me for geography.
So in January 2024, the LA Innocence Project takes the case. They request that 14 items be tested or retested, which include items from the burnt orange van, which we will talk about later, and additional forensics
Right.
on a piece of duct tape found on Laci's clothes. The judge only allowed the duct tape, but now and there was a bloody mattress inside this van that we'll talk of later, but that has been tested as early as 2019. So also they state that this LA Innocence Project states that within a 1 mile radius of the Peterson home, there were 24 sightings of Laci, and within a 3 mile radius, an additional 7, which is a total of 31. They also question taped
That
jailhouse.
morning?
Yes.
Yeah, not just that morning. Yes, that morning, that specific morning.
Yes.
Correct.
But I wanted to know the difference between the LA Innocence Project and the Innocence Project. Like,
okay, I'll get to that. Let me see. It was founded in 2022
and the reason
with a $1 million.
the LA one.
The LA Innocence Project, founded in 2022 with $1 million in seed money donated from an exoneree after a wrongful conviction. It has a staff of 20 members.
Wow.
And as per Oxygen.com, an article that I read stated that there were several more law-based advocacy groups in the state. So that kind of leads you to like, what does that mean? Like, are they not that based in the law? Are they more based in everybody gets a fair trial?
Say?
Like this, as per Oxygen.com, there was an article, and it stated that there are several other more law-based advocacy groups in the state. So just the wording of it, of how in the article they were talking about this LA Innocence Project.
Yeah.
I don't know how
like more law-based.
it
It should all be law-based.
Right. So
Yeah, because
I don't know.
The whole, like you said in the beginning, the whole premise of the LA Innocence Project, what they're requesting is, and I had kind of mentioned this, is that he didn't receive a fair trial because one, all the discovery was not presented to them. And two, some of the testing was not, DNA testing wasn't even done on the things. There was no forensic evidence that tied him to this murder. It was totally circumstantial. That's what they're basing this on.
So
what is the regular Innocence Project? Like, where are they? What's the difference?
They are well established. They've been around for years. That's chock full of really highly experienced lawyers. That is what you would normally think of what the Innocence Project would be. Tons of lawyers who really want to comb over past cases and see where things went wrong and re-go over everything. And where I don't believe that this LA Innocence Project is so new. It's so fresh. It's not, I mean, you can do some further research on it, but it just doesn't seem to be anything near what the original Innocence Project is.
And it's interesting as to why the original Innocence Project did not take this on. So when there's a criminal trial, the prosecution has the burden of proof, and the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this person is guilty. There cannot be any doubt. So the jury must have been convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that he was guilty.
Well, there was some of the jurors that were on the actual jury on the Scott Peterson documentary that was 3 parts. And what they were saying is, you know, based on the evidence that was given to them, that was presented to them, that's the conclusion that they would make. But now that they're hearing that there's other evidence that was never presented because it was not made available to the defense, or it wasn't even investigated, which is a big part of Scott Peterson's claim, is that there was people, like Lori said early, a lot of people who saw Laci Peterson later that morning. And the prosecution's biggest piece of evidence was the timeline.
Right.
And the timeline they used to establish was by that woman, I think her name was Karen Server, that she saw Laci with the dog. The dog was out when the dog was returned back.
Oh, the woman who
that
returned
was the
the dog
timeline
back to the yard, right?
Yes.
Well,
yes, I don't
neighbor?
remember her name. The neighbor.
Yes.
That woman.
Let's start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's start from
Yes.
So Scott goes fishing, right? But then later tells somebody he went golfing.
No. So yes, that's what happens. But so it starts with she's missing and he comes home, right?
Yeah.
And he finds out she's missing. The only people he said he went golfing to are Laci's parents, because according to him, they didn't know about the boat. And according to him, the boat was bought as a gift. It was going to be a surprise for the father, for Laci's father, because she was expecting a boy and the father really enjoyed fishing and he was going to be able to bond with his grandson. So he didn't tell them that he went out fishing. He said he was golfing, which would be something that he would do. I don't know that he told anybody else.
He told the cop in the one I watched that he was going to go golfing, but then it was too cold that morning.
Yes.
He changed his mind and went fishing.
Yes.
For the maiden voyage of his new boat.
Right.
Yes.
Which
said
makes,
that in mine too.
Right. Which makes total sense, because if it's too cold to golf, it'll be just perfect out on that bay with the wind blowing. It's cold as hell on that bay. It makes no sense. It's just stupid.
Yeah, but you're going fishing, so you're going to like bundle up. You're going to put all your gear on and yeah.
And it was 90 miles away. So the temperature 90 miles away, I don't know if it was south or north 90 miles, because that's going to make a difference in the temperature too.
Right. But on the
or
water,
90 minutes, not 90 miles.
Right.
I know it's always colder, but again.
For sure.
Yeah. So that, that's how it does start. So I got the same story on the Scott Peterson side too, that it was a game day decision. He was originally going to go golfing, but the reason that he told his in-laws that is because, he didn't want to ruin the surprise. Okay. They didn't know about the boat.
Yeah. So he comes home and she's not there, and he puts his clothes in the washing machine. He takes a shower, which when you're out fishing all day, that is 100% the first thing you would do.
Yes. I agree.
And your wife she could be at the grocery store, for crying out loud. Cell phones weren't a huge thing at this time.
No. Her car was home. So it's either somebody
was home.
Somebody must have came and got her. Like, he could think to himself, maybe her mom came and got her and she's at the house.
Well, that's what
that's what he starts making phone calls.
That's what he thought, that she was at her mom's, figuring that, it was Christmas Eve. She was going to go over.
Right.
Her mom came and picked her up. That's what he assumed happened.
Right.
That's what his words were.
Right.
And
then he makes the phone calls to the family in case Laci's missing.
Right. And to the friends. But at this point, he didn't call the cops. He called the friends. And then what wound up happening is Laci Peterson's mom called the police and reported her missing.
I believe it was the stepfather. The stepfather.
Oh,
Yeah.
it could have. Yeah. The stepfather. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because he told the cops that he was golfing, and then the cops find out that he was fishing.
Yes.
When he made that phone call, he said her husband was golfing.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
He's the one who said that. Yes, exactly. So the way that the LA Innocence Project even got involved in this, because you asked the question, like, why didn't the other Innocence Project get involved in it? The way that they got involved in it is that this filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, Shireen Anderson, she started, she's a journalist. In 2013, she started researching the case. Now, this is 10 years later, she starts researching the case. And she's looking at the evidence and she was looking at the facts. And she reached out to Scott in prison, but she didn't hear back from him. So she wound up reaching out to Janie Peterson. And Janie Peterson is Scott, her husband is Scott's younger brother. So that's how this whole thing even came about.
Older brother. Scott's the youngest. Definitely older brother.
Definitely?
He's the youngest.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's the only product of his parents.
Yep.
Okay.
They both had other children from prior relationships. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why he was like the golden child.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, there was still a lot of unanswered questions. Now, at this point, Janie Peterson is telling us that, when Scott was convicted, her family was standing by his side. Scott's family was standing by his side. They would go visit him every single week because he was initially, sentenced to death. He was given the death penalty. So they would go visit him every single week. Someone from that family would be there visiting him every single week just to give him some hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then 10 years later, this investigator, documentary filmmaker, Shireen, contacts her and is like, listen, some of this stuff isn't adding up. So all these years of Lainey, looking into this, and Janie, standing by his side, she actually, and I don't know at what point dies, but she becomes an attorney herself. Mm-hmm. Once her kids, I want to say her kids are grown. So it's probably it's not in the beginning when she's talking to this, because this is only 10 years later. Once her kids are grown, she says, you know what, I've put so much research into this, and now I know so much more about the law than I did when he was initially convicted. So she went to law school and became an attorney herself.
Yeah.
And that's when other investigators start getting involved in this. And this is 10 years, after he was convicted.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, there's very funny, I think it's funny. There's very funny, memes out on social media that say, put her face on there and say,
oh my God.
Tell me you're in love with your brother-in-law without saying it.
Tell me you're in love with your brother-in-law without saying you're in love with your brother-in-law.
Without saying it, you're in love with your brother-in-law. This
chick went and became a fucking lawyer to try to free him.
Yeah, she's just a little too hardcore for some people. Some people are like,
All right, so back to the day she went missing. So the version I watched, the cop was like, listen, my goal here in investigating Scott was to clear Scott. I'm focusing on Scott to make sure it's not Scott. Because obviously your boyfriend or husband or significant other is going to be the first suspect, especially when they are gone the whole day without basically an alibi.
Right. But he did have the receipt. He did have the receipt from the boat launch.
Yeah. Yes.
And Scott's side of that, what you just said, is that he overheard the two detectives say, we think this guy's guilty. The first day, very first day.
The detective does say that Scott was very calm.
Right.
He was extremely calm, answering questions nicely, calling him by his first name, not detective, calling him Al. Very, oddly calm for somebody whose pregnant wife is missing.
Right.
And they did live near a park where a lot of homeless people lived.
Yes. So now, in regards back to that Innocence Project, I just want to tell you one other thing. So another thing that LA Innocence Project is pushing for is that there was a jailhouse conversation that was taped. And in that conversation, an inmate stated that Laci had confronted a burglar. Oh my God, I can't speak.
Burglar.
Yeah, there you go. That works.
A burglar.
Yeah, in progress. And so that tape was given over to the police department and was
Who said that,
subsequently
though?
lost.
Who said that?
It was an inmate that was in prison.
A corrections officer.
How would they know?
A corrections
'Cause they would-
officer overheard because all the things are taped.
Right. It hurt. He heard it on the recording. A
He heard it
corrections officer
Heard it on the
yes, because
recording.
this was yes.
How would
And sent it
anybody
in.
know that, though? Who's going to say that? The burglar?
No, the burglar called someone in jail. Yes, that's who's saying it.
I don't believe that.
Because the burglars were the two of them were in jail.
I know. We didn't even get there yet.
I know, but that's where the tape comes from.
That's where the tape comes from.
That's where the tape comes from. And the corrections officer in the Scott Peterson documentary, he's on it. And he says, I contacted the detectives twice and I told them I have this tape. And the detectives, that's part of the discovery that the defense never received. And now they're saying there's no tape that exists.
Right now,
This corrections officer is saying there is a tape, and I know it because I turned it over.
Yeah.
So there's holes.
There are things. Now, another thing for Scott's sister-in-law is that the courthouse scanner had a glitch. So when it was copying out the pages for the trial to give to, each different attorney, it would glitch. So it turned out that there were like 10 pages from Scott's discovery that weren't unearthed until they were going through the appeal process and going through all these boxes of documents, because the scanner had this thing where it like glitched. So they were like all squeezed together and no one had received them. Now, the importance of that is when that woman neighbor had the Peterson's dog, put it back in the backyard and closed the gate, what was missing in those pages was the information from the mailman. Now, the mailman said,
Right.
per his timestamps, he delivered mail to that address between 10:35 and 10:50. That's when he delivers the mail to the Peterson home. And he states that the gate was ajar when he came to deliver the mail and the dog did not bark. And he said the dog always barked when he was there, whether he was inside or outside. But the thing is that 25 minutes earlier is when the neighbor went and put the dog in the backyard.
So why wouldn't the dog bark when he saw the mailman?
Because the dog wasn't there. The gate was open.
That's the whole question. So the woman comes, she puts the dog into the backyard, closes the gate. 25 minutes later, the mailman comes, the gate is open, and the dog is nowhere to be found.
There's no dog.
No.
Right.
And at that time frame, 2030.
So wait, wasn't the dog in the backyard when Scott got home?
The dog had the leash on him when Scott got home.
Right.
But he was in the backyard. See, that to me doesn't make sense right there, because this mailman is
where
saying,
was the dog when the mailman came, but the dog was back when Scott got home?
Scott got back.
So,
See, yeah.
well, what the Scott's people are saying is, again, they're using that timeline. The prosecution's timeline is based on when they say that woman put the dog back in the gate. But they're assuming that Laci wasn't home. Laci could have been home when that woman put the dog back in the gate. She could have ran in the house to get something. The phone could have rang. She could have been home. And then she went out and she took the dog for a walk.
Afterwards.
But
then how does the dog get back in the yard when Scott gets home?
Well, again, she encountered the burglars, which is what Scott's team thinks. They grabbed her. If the dog was out, they put the dog back in the dog was on a leash. They put the dog back in the fence and they took her because there's witnesses that say that they saw a pregnant woman being put into a van. There's more than one witness. There's 5 or 6 witnesses that say that.
Right. So then
And
this is
again,
So the one I watched they mentioned the burglars. They didn't mention anything about a van or anything about witnesses seeing a woman getting put in a van.
and that's because it's Laci's side, and the judge decided that the timeline that the prosecution came up with was the timeline. So the burglars that were caught, and they said initially that they did the robbery on the 27th.
Mhm.
But they came home on the 27th.
26th.
So then
they came home on the 26th.
They
Right?
came.
I have it written down.
Wait a
let me
second.
think. Yeah, because I have it written down too.
Let
You're
me see what
right,
the date
though.
was.
The timeline didn't make sense.
So whatever date I don't remember. I have it written down here. I
So
just don't know where.
I feel like we're going like all over the place. So during the investigation, they realized that the neighbor's house was broken into, the next door neighbors,
Right.
who had left, I think on the 24th or
24th.
the 23rd. They left before Christmas.
Right.
They left
Came
on the
home after
24th.
Christmas.
They left on the 24th. They returned on the 20th.
The 26th.
So the cops settled on the 26th. But the two burglars say they burglarized the house across the street, but know nothing about Laci. The burglars say they think they were at the house on the 27th, but the homeowners were home. So the cops settle on the 26th.
Yeah. So they
But
changed.
how could they have done that with all of the media coverage
media.
outside of Laci's house?
Makes
Well,
Why
that's
would
what
they
Scott.
burglarize a house?
Well,
When
that's
there's fucking cops and news reporters across the street.
what Scott's side is saying, and the
Okay.
problem is,
I do have that written down.
so that's the other problem is the prosecution. Like I said, they're using this timeline of the neighbor returning the dog back as that is what happened. That's the timeline that they're saying. That's the last time Laci was seen alive. Is when
But I also have that.
when Scott left, he was the last person to see her alive. So the judge did not allow any evidence or any testimony about the burglary. That was not allowed in the trial at all. And it wasn't even investigated properly because the van was never investigated, not thoroughly. It was never thoroughly investigated until 10 years later.
So the burglars came in a van?
So the burglars came in a car, but the burglars are associated with the owner of the van. So the owner of the van, that was actually a van that was found, like Lori said, that there was a mattress in and that there was blood on, that the fire investigator went to. And the owner of the van said his employees were allowed to take the van home to work. So the two people that were arrested, one of them had associations with the workers at the thing. So they broke into the house. They called their friends with the van to come and get the stuff, right? Then the place where the van was dropped off and it was burnt was, again, associated with the owner of the van. It was the owner's sister's next door neighbor is where the van was burnt. Like, there's just so many questions that were never really investigated until Scott's team started working on this investigation.
So that
They
van,
tested DNA from the mattress in the van?
yes,
No,
yes, it was tested.
no,
Yes,
no.
as
The
early
blood
as
was tested.
2019.
The blood was in 2019, not before his trial. That's
No,
what I'm
they
saying.
didn't know about it. No, they didn't even know about it.
Well, they did know about it, though. They did know about it. They knew about the van. And that's what I'm telling you is the police knew about the van. And a fire investigator went out there and he saw the blood stain. He took a little sample of it and he put it in the luminol and it turned it blue, which means it is human blood. So then he had to take another sample and send it off for additional testing someplace else. And then it came back that it wasn't human blood. But there was no other testing done. It was just that one little tiny sample. There wasn't
So what happened
DNA.
in 2019, Laura?
So let me say, it was. I read that was the last time that fabric with the blood on it was tested. Was 2019.
But
That's
did
what I
they
read.
link
What do
it to? I mean, the woman was pregnant. We all know how many times they take your fucking blood when you're pregnant. It's like
Right.
almost every month towards the end. They had enough blood to test. Was it Laci's blood?
I believe,
But there wasn't DNA testing done.
I believe it was inconsequential, the amount of DNA that was on there. I don't know.
But there's
What do I know?
other things that they could have gotten DNA off of. It doesn't have to be just blood. That's what I'm saying. They didn't do DNA testing. DNA testing wasn't done. There was no forensic evidence. There was not so much as hair. There was not so much
There's
as
hair on the pliers.
Yeah, there was hair on the pliers.
the hair on the pliers was Laci's.
Yeah.
But the van, there was no forensic evidence of the van. There was none. Except for that blood.
That van fire was reported December 25th, and it was 1 mile from the Peterson house.
Right.
So it is
The
interesting.
van was set on fire.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And when it was 1 mile from the Peterson house.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot of questions that really, really weren't ever answered.
So Scott's claim is that he woke up that morning, saw Laci, they shared a bowl of cereal. He went to his warehouse, checked emails, and then took his boat that was at the warehouse up to the San Francisco Bay, which is 90 miles away, and went fishing for the day. And then he called her at like 2:15 and left a voicemail. And then he went back to his warehouse, dropped the boat off,
and then went home.
and then went home.
4:30. At 4:30, Scott returns home.
Right.
He wasn't concerned that she wasn't home because he thought she was at her mom's house. Like you said, he takes his clothes off, he takes a shower. He was out fishing.
Yeah.
Then he
that's
calls
normal.
his mom and finds out she's not there. Detectives say that they canvass the neighborhood and they're following up on tips. It is Karen's service. She was the one who found the dog running around. That's, she walked the dog back to the house. She put it inside the fence. She went shopping. Then she has her receipt that's time-stamped 10:34. So she probably found the dog at 10:18. So they are saying that Scott, that's the timeline that they're saying. That she couldn't, first of all, they're saying that Laci couldn't have been in the house when she found the dog. She could have been in the house. How does she know she wasn't in the house? Just because the dog was out with a leash?
Right. Right.
It doesn't mean she wasn't in the house. Because
Right.
then there's many other neighbors that saw her walking with the dog after that. After that timeline.
Yeah.
And Scott was gone already. Scott was gone.
Right.
So in regards to that, I had watched this, like I said, true crime rocket science on YouTube. And this guy was interesting. He presented this theory that Scott actually killed Laci at some point after 8:30 p.m. on the evening of the 23rd or early morning on the 24th. Now, he says after 8:30 p.m. because Laci spoke to her mother at 8:30 p.m. So it was she was the last person to speak to Laci, was her mother. And he proposes that she was either strangled or suffocated in the home. And this theory is supported by the criminal profiler, Sharon Hagen. She was on I believe she was on the Netflix one.
She was on the Netflix one.
Yeah. And then he feels her body was then wrapped in chicken wire and a tarp and loaded into the oversized toolbox in the bed of his truck, then driven to the warehouse where he attached the cement anchors to the chicken wire, hence the pliers with Laci's hair wrapped around them. And then he put her in the boat, drove to the area of the marina in darkness, because there are several other launch sites besides the official marina one. He felt that once he launched his boat, he went to the far, which is the ocean side of the Brooks Island, which would provide a visual shield. He dumped the body, and then he thinks that Scott returned to the marina again the next day for plausible deniability, plus to check that the body was still submerged. And supposedly a bloodhound picked up Laci's scent near the marina. And he feels the body probably would have stayed submerged except for the extreme floodwaters in the bay in April. And it's weird because some people say that, like, for the size of the boat that Scott bought, it's really not even appropriate for that body of water. I mean,
Well,
that
I was
body of
thinking the
water
same thing, quite honestly.
has really strong wind, really strong currents. So
that wasn't a big boat at all.
no. So then he because there's a whole thing where people say, oh, but how, in the morning when Scott went to the marina where he has the receipt, he had to, bring the boat into the water on the launch dock where there's people all over. He had to drive that boat past all types of people who live in that marina on boats. And it's a small boat. You would have been able to see if there was something in there. So that's why this guy had brought up this theory of that he actually made 2 trips to the marina. But in regards to her walking the dog, that's another thing. Was she even capable at that point of the 3-minute walk each way to the park? Because as far as a timeline,
What do you mean by capable?
Because of her condition with being
on
pregnant, like
December
she was out of breath. She was,
on December 14th was the Christmas party that Laci went to. She had to walk 3 houses down. She was exhausted by the time she got there, her friends say, and she sat in that chair the whole night. This is the picture of her when she has a red outfit on.
but
And then,
also her friends said that she wasn't herself. And so at this point, we know now that he was cheating on her with Amber Frey. She may have been hip to that. And that
well,
could explain her, you know, withdrawn,
right. And another
you know.
theory that comes across is, she also reported to her doctor that she had tried to walk several times and ended up throwing up and felt dizzy over and over again. Her doctor told her, you really need to stop walking the dog. She had then started, because she couldn't really walk the dog, she had started some prenatal yoga classes. She went to that class. She had to be walked back to her car. She didn't feel well. So another thing that's out there is that Scott, being the fertilizing salesman, decided to start poisoning her. And these times when
Right.
she
Which
felt
I
really
think,
ill were the times that he had given her something to try and get rid of the baby, get rid of her.
right.
So there's that too. So there's the whole question of whether, you know, she was really capable of taking that walk. So it's a 3-mile walk from her house to the park. But like I said, on the 14th, she had a hard time walking 3 houses down. Now, the park is like 7 houses down. So I don't know. So 4 days before she vanished, her yoga instructor reports that Laci needed help getting back to her car, and that Laci commented to her that her dog was probably mad at her because she hadn't been walking him. She reported to friends that when she walked the dog, she felt dizzy and was sick to her stomach and had to return home. And this happened several times. So were these the symptoms of late pregnancy, or was her fertilizer husband poisoning her?
I mean, these are all possible.
Yeah.
These are all possible.
So the first episode of the one that I watched, now they're talking about how a search has started. Scott will not talk to the media at all. He stays away from the media. It's only her family. And then the first episode ends with a phone call being made to the police station. And there's a woman on the line that claims she's Scott Peterson, that Scott Peterson is her boyfriend and has been for a couple of months. So then
You know
we
what?
meet Amber Frey.
Yeah. You know what though? When he's in and he's interviewing with the detective for the first time, and the detective asks him, "How long have you been married?" He goes, 4 or 5 years. I can't remember. I'm like, bro, really? I mean, I get it. For me, after 20 years, I don't remember how long, but
Well, I was
you're only
going to say,
married.
Laura, you. Oh,
Hey, at least I got the excuse. 20 years, 4 or 5. You can't I don't know.
yeah, that's too soon
That's
to forget how many
that's too
years you've
soon.
been
Yeah,
together.
that was too soon to forget. At least for me.
Yeah. So Amber starts talking to the detectives and tells her on, I think it was December 9th, he told her that he lost his wife. And
Well,
that was the same day he bought the boat.
yeah. So here's the
He
timeline with
tells
her.
Amber that he lost his wife. And
Yeah.
that's the day he bought the boat.
So here's the timeline with Amber. October 24th, Scott meets Amber's best friend while he's at a convention. So while he's at this convention, he's acting like he's single. He makes statements like, oh, maybe I'd have better luck with women if I put horny bastard on my name tag. Meanwhile, his wife is at home planning a birthday party for him. So October, so it's the 24th. The 27th, they go to the doctors. This is the first time the baby moves. Scott is not into it at all. November 20th, Scott actually meets Amber. December 9th, he buys a boat, and the same day he tells Amber that his wife is dead, and this is the 1st
Mhm.
Christmas he's going to be spending without her. And then December
Mhm.
14th is a Christmas party that Laci goes to alone, and he goes to the party with Amber Frey. So,
Right.
and then December 30th, Amber contacts the detectives to say that something ain't right. The
Right.
cheese is stinking in
And
Denmark.
then they wiretap. They wiretap. So now they
Right.
can hear the conversations between Amber and Scott,
Right.
which are very telling.
29 hours of phone conversations between Amber.
Yeah.
So
he finally tells her he's been lying about traveling, and then he tells her about Laci being missing. And he says, once we find Laci, I'll be able to explain everything.
and you know
Now,
when he was
I have
saying
here that the two burglars begged to take the polygraph
yes,
because they were obviously nervous that they were going to be, wrapped up in the Laci Peterson.
implicated. Well, this
Right,
is the
exactly.
thing with that. As any kind of felon who's incarcerated, you do not want to be involved with anything having to do with a nun, a pregnant woman, because
For sure.
it's as
Child.
right as skelly as criminals are. They do have a certain code, and that's what
Yeah.
I had read too. Is that the people involved with the burglary were like, dude, we'll take the
We
lie
have
detector
nothing
right
to do
now.
with
We
this.
have nothing to do with it.
Yep. Hook me
Which
up
could be
right now.
true, could not be true. Now, in regards to what you
Right.
just said, when Amber and Scott were back and forth on the phone and conversation, and Amber says, at what point were you going to tell me in person, Scott? And he said, once we found her. And she said, what was that? And he goes, once we find her, then there will be resolution, and I will be, and he pauses. And I think he wanted to say free, but he pauses and he says, I will be able to explain everything to you.
Right. Right. Now, the whole time I'm watching this, I'm thinking, up until this point, why haven't they gone to the San Francisco Bay yet? Finally, on day 15, they start focusing on the San Francisco Bay. So I kind of believe the detective where he was like, I wanted to rule him out. Like, to me, that they didn't go to the San Francisco Bay until day 15 leads me to believe that they weren't really focused on him as the suspect. Unless they just thought he did it at the house and then
But
didn't think he threw the body in the water.
This is the thing, though. No matter what, say Scott didn't do it. Whoever the fuck did do it, why would you drive 90 minutes away to dump the body in the water?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
The
He
same
must not
exact
have been a
place.
suspect, because if he were the primary suspect, where was he that day? He was in the San Francisco Bay. Why wouldn't they go check there first if he was really their number one suspect?
Well, Scott's explanation for that is the police. So once Amber Frey was, came public and she did her press conference, right? And then search for Laci really kind of stopped. Like they really weren't. And that's what he said he was afraid of. Like, if they found out that I was cheating on her, then they're going to think I did it and they're not going to search for her.
Right.
Okay?
The focus was now on him being a cheater and not the fact that his
Right.
wife is still missing.
Exactly. And
Yes.
the other thing he says is the Modesto Police Department told the murderers where to put the body, because they told the murderers where Scott was, and we already knew that the Modesto Police Department was looking at Scott Peterson because he had a girlfriend and he cheated on her, and he already lied
so
about
he
that.
Thinks that on day 15, when they announced that they were going to go look at the San Francisco Bay, somebody went and dumped her body up there?
Well, she had been there already. They had already dumped it there because they had already at that point. I mean, Amber came out to the police on the 30th.
Yeah.
What was the date that she? Let me look at the date that she had her press conference. Because when she had her press conference, that's when they stopped really, the search party stopped looking.
I mean, listen, clearly I'm not a criminal investigator. I do billing for a law firm, by the way. But if her body was so decomposed that only her spinal cord showed up, she was in that water for quite some time.
Well, we know she was in that water for quite some time because they didn't find her until April. And she went missing in December, right? She went missing in December. So we know her body was in the water for a long time. You know, I'm just telling you, that's his explanation as to why she would have been found there, is because the Modesto Police Department let everybody know where Scott Peterson was. And the Modesto Police Department was saying that he wasn't cooperating and had already announced that he had lied about having a girlfriend. I'm not saying that Scott's not guilty. What I'm saying is there is reasonable doubt, and I don't believe that the jury and the defense was able to put on the proper defense, because I don't believe that they had the information, one, that the prosecutors had, and I don't think that the detectives did enough of the research. I think that they did think he was guilty. I do.
Yeah.
Because the burglary, there was a lot that went on with that, again, it wasn't even allowed to be presented it wasn't allowed to be mentioned in court.
Right.
Not at all.
Yeah, and after Amber's press conference, Laci's family then had a press conference basically saying they no longer support Scott.
Right. So, listen, like I said, I definitely, the guy's a cheater, the guy's a liar, the guy's a dog. I don't know that means he's a murderer. I don't know that,
That's what the jurors said on the Netflix show. There was the first juror. I don't know if he was the foreman. I don't know if the number one juror is the foreman. Like, so when you have a jury, somebody's picked as the foreman, and that's
I don't know if it's the number. I would assume it would be the number one.
I would assume so, but I don't know if the next person gets
number one,
a title. Right, exactly. Right. So it was number one and number four. But basically that's what they said. Was he a scumbag husband? For sure, no doubt. But that doesn't make him a murderer, obviously.
Right. No.
Right.
But I think that no matter what, there's something very fundamentally wrong with Scott Peterson. I definitely think that he is a class A narcissist. I think that he has emotional and mental problems. I don't think that he's your run-of-the-mill guy. I really believe that he really exerts all the symptoms of a narcissistic personality disorder.
Well, if he was truly the golden child and his parents never held him accountable for anything and let him get away with things,
Well, look, there's
that
also
could lead to that.
Yes, there's also the story of his mother. Okay, so his mother
get into that.
That, as a child, Scott's feet barely ever touched the ground because someone was always holding him. He was the golden child. Okay, so looking at his mother, Scott's mother, Jackie, as a mom, her own father was murdered in 1945, and his body was found on Christmas Eve, bludgeoned. Okay, and this is when she was only 2.5. Her mother had a mental breakdown and placed her in a Catholic school that was basically an orphanage at age 5. She only saw her mother like once a week. Her mother passed away when Jackie was 18. Jackie subsequently had 2 children from 2 different men, and both were given up for adoption before she had Scott. And, you see her walking around with the oxygen. In that orphanage, she had several reoccurring lung infections, and that's why she is on that oxygen. So
Wow.
Needless to say, Scott was doted upon, and it's kind of like almost a pattern between him and her, especially with the timing and the Christmas. It's just weird. The more indulgent and lacking in boundaries, the more serious the character disorder of narcissism is created. And it's usually happening from either permissive parenting, which I think was what Scott had, or abusive parenting. So was Scott's mom the mom that let him do whatever he wanted, filled him with grandiose ideas? Was she smothering but emotionally unavailable? She certainly felt guilty and spoiled him. Or was he just born that way? But either way, he seems incapable, or in the very least frightened of the emotional commitment and investment that having a child would bring on. He was not interested in feeling the baby kick, But Amber Frey's child caused him no problem at all. I mean, his parents try and make it seem like this relationship that he had with Amber Frey was just like the sexual thing. But no, because he picked her kid up from school. He made them elaborate meals. He totally love bombed Amber Frey and her kid also. So I
Yeah.
think as soon as he wasn't like Prince Charming with Laci's full attention now in the pregnancy, as her pregnancy advances, I think between that, having the baby when he really didn't want to, finding out that he had these two step siblings and that his mother has lied to him, because the way I read things was she was always trying to be like the perfect mom, perfect mother, like holier than thou, even gave Laci a hard time. So it's this whole persona that his mother put on to then find out, yeah, but you ditched two of your kids.
Yeah, so she had two other kids that she gave up for adoption, and one of them now wrote a book called
Yes,
Blood Brother 33 Reasons Why My Brother Scott Peterson is Guilty. So
yes.
I asked our friend at the library to get that for me, and I'm going to read that. But there's another book Lori found.
Yeah, there's
Talk
another
about
book.
that.
Well, let me find the one for that book.
But while you're looking for it, I just want to say, listen, he can be a narcissist and he can be a horrible person. And we kind of all agree about that, but that doesn't make him a murderer.
No, but him being in the San Francisco Bay and then her washing up and an unborn fetus washing up in the San Francisco Bay, like, to me, if I were on that jury, because the jury only deliberated for 90 minutes, that's not a very long time.
No, like I said, but that's all circumstantial. This is circumstantial evidence. Because listen, one of the things that the judge did grant is DNA testing on that duct tape that Laci was washed up with. So let's see if Scott Peterson's DNA is on there. Well, then we have something concrete. Then we know that Scott is guilty, because why else would his DNA be on that duct tape, right?
Right.
Correct.
So, like I said, like really, it's not like we're questioning whether or not he's guilty or he's innocent. Really, the question is, did he have a fair trial? And that's really what it comes down to.
Well,
And Laci's mom. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that there are reasons that lead up to myself and other people thinking that he's guilty, and one of them is because he's a narcissist. That
No, I agree.
definitely helps it along the way.
100% agree. But what I'm saying is, when you're in, and Kelly can attest to this too, when you're in a court, it's not about personality. It's not about, it's not about that. It's about hard evidence, forensic evidence. Not circumstantial evidence is circumstantial evidence. It is what it is. And I really believe that he was convicted in the court of public opinion before it even went to trial.
Agreed. And that is why they changed venue. They changed venue.
But there was no place. There was no venue you could change because it was national news.
Coverage.
Because it was national coverage. It was national coverage. That's the problem.
Yeah,
that's the problem.
The California Supreme Court did overturn the death penalty because they don't feel that the jury was the jury was improperly screened for bias.
Yeah, so what happened was the judge would ask the jurors if they believed in the death penalty. And if the juror said, "I don't believe in the death penalty," the judge dismissed them. The judge is supposed to, if he asks, "Do you believe in the death penalty?" and they say, "I don't believe in the death penalty," the judge is supposed to ask additional questions, and the judge did not do that. So that is the reason it was overturned. The sentence was overturned.
So now he's on life without parole.
Right. And now they're trying to get him a new trial, but they need to get the evidence that they need to see if a new trial is warranted, because they weren't given some of the discovery. And
I
they
mean,
weren't.
honestly, there probably wasn't the forensic testing that back then that there is now. So
Yes, there
great.
is. Yeah, it's you guys are like, this is 20 years ago. There were cell phones 20 years ago. There was they traced him by his cell phone. There was forensic evidence 20 years ago. It's not like those things weren't around. They were absolutely
But the
around.
DNA testing that they have now, that wasn't around 20
Oh,
years ago.
absolutely. 20 years ago there was DNA testing. Yes, there
But
was.
not like there is now. That's what I'm saying. Like, it's much more progressed now.
But it wasn't even done. You know, the tests weren't even
Right.
done. And evidence is missing. And, you know, there are other factors.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm not saying that he's not guilty. I'm just saying that at the least, this is a man's life. And whether he's in prison or he's out of prison,
Right.
like, he should have a fair trial.
Yeah,
That's
no,
all.
I think that they should. I mean, I'll be really interested to see if they do
A
get
new
this,
trial.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I
So
mean, so Lori found another book.
yeah. So there is. Let me just talk about the book with his sister. So that, like we said before, is called Blood Brother. Okay. And that is written by a woman called Ann Bird, who is Scott's stepsister. Now, after Scott was
Half
introduced-
sister.
Half sister,
Yeah,
same
half-
mother.
Yeah, half sister. So after Scott was introduced to her, they became close. She became close with Laci, and after Laci's disappearance for 5 months, Scott lived with this Ann Bird in San Francisco. Ann's husband was very leery of Scott's, and then incidents occurred that changed Ann's mind about Scott's innocence. Scott's hits on a very young babysitter, to which Jackie even calls Ann and tells her to lie about it, and says, if anybody asks about that babysitter incident, it didn't happen. Scott's drinking excessively, and he's watching porn on the family's computer. So his sister, his half sister, whom he lived with for 5 months, then decided, no, I'm not digging it. So then there was another book, and this one is called, It Was Always Me by John Camerman. And it says, forget everything you know or thought you knew about the most publicly covered murders of our time. The evidence in this book leads to one man committing the most chilling and widely known murders that have captivated the public's interest and caused terror throughout communities, including the Zodiac killings. Based on the investigation by veteran detective John Cameron and others contained in this book, Edward Edwards is also now linked to the murder of Steve Avery, the Black Dahlia, and Laci Peterson, for which he set up Scott Peterson, who is currently on death row, for killing her. The evidence also strongly suggests that he killed JonBenet Ramsey and that he framed the parents, who were later exonerated. So
And what's it called?
That is called It Was Always Me by John Camerman, and is in regards to a person named Edward Edwards, who is a
How
serial
about that?
So that's a whole
Yeah.
other wackadoo.
It's a whole other layer.
As a whole.
That is a whole other layer. You know, I'm looking at my notes here again. So in addition to the corrections officer, I actually have his name. It was Xavier Ponte, who had the recording that we talked about earlier. There was also a watch. So Laci had this Croton watch that was given to her from her grandmother, and she was wearing it. She was wearing it on Christmas Eve because she was going to wear it over to her parents' house, because that's where they were going on Christmas Eve. She wanted her parents to see it. And that watch was brought into a pawn shop on 12/31/2002. It was brought in by a woman. The pawn shop called the police, and they came in and they took the watch. Now nobody knows where the watch is.
Why did the pawn shop call the police?
Because they have to. So if they
How
suspect,
did they know that it was missing?
the pawn shops have rules. They have to keep things for a certain amount of time. If they think things are stolen or suspicious, they have to report it. Like, those are things that they have to report. So it may have come out that she was I don't know specifically why, but I do know that pawn shops need to do that. And the pawn shop owner said, listen, I called them about the watch. They came in, they took the watch. The watch is missing now. There was no testing done on that watch. There was no DNA testing done on that watch. It may or may not have been her watch, but it was a very distinctive watch. You know, it was.
It's just interesting to me that the pawn shop would know to call the cops about a watch. I'm sure they get watches every day.
Yeah, I don't know why they what made them
Again,
pregnant.
maybe it was reported what she was wearing. You know,
Yeah.
maybe he thought it was suspicious.
Yeah, maybe there was just something that tipped him off. Now, in regards to Amber Frey, she's got kind of a messed up story too. So it's just interesting how all these pieces of the puzzle add up to people getting into these different relationships and making these different choices. So Amber Frey's mom was divorced when she was 4, and her mom was always on a manhunt. She had 3 husbands in 2 years, and once she was
That's a
with
lot of
husband
work,
number,
man.
yeah,
Gosh. Can't
She
you just have
sends-
sex with them and not marry
yeah,
them?
and not married. She sends Amber and her sister to live with their dad when Amber was 6. When Amber was 12, she went back to live with her mom, and her sister stayed with the dad. And after high school, she was fighting with her mom. She moves back in with her dad. Her first boyfriend was controlling. Her second boyfriend, she was with him real quick and had an abortion. A week later, she meets a married man with a pregnant wife. And this guy gives her some whole song and dance about how they just got married in Vegas and, you know, he doesn't want the baby and the whole thing. So he gives her the song and dance. They move in together. But the guy keeps going home to see the wife that he's still married to and the baby. So then she moves out. And then a month
And what year
later,
was that?
I didn't have the
Oh, wait,
year.
a month later? Is that when she meets Scott?
Nope. A month later, she meets someone else and they move in
God.
together. They move in together and she gets pregnant. He splits. After that is when she meets Scott. So I'm just saying there's a setup for Amber too. Went through a very hard time. And here comes Mr. Charming, Mr.
Yeah.
Golden Boy with all his bullshit. And just the amount of lies that he told her and the lengths that he went to. He gave his friends in Europe names when he was supposedly in Paris at the Eiffel Tower. Like he would call
Oh,
her
right.
from,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
He would
and he
call
wasn't even
her-
there.
No, he would call her from the bathroom in his house and you hear the shower running because he's talking to her at home when Lacey's there. Just like the elaborateness of his bullshit was just unbelievable. So in
Yeah.
2006, Amber Frey marries a police officer and she gets divorced 2 years later. So she has 2 kids now. And, you know, Lacey's baby was due on February 10th, which was Amber Frey's birthday.
Ugh.
So it's just weird, the weird coincidence in it. Like Scott's grandfather was killed on Christmas Eve. Lacey goes missing on Christmas Eve. You know, all these different messed up relationships that the people involved had before that they got together. It's just this
Yeah.
recipe for an absolute shit show disaster.
Well, going back to what you said about him going to great lengths, the jurors in the show that I watched didn't think the affair was a big deal, but the charade he kept up and the lying was a big deal. Like
Oh, yeah.
the investigative profiler said his behavior and emotional detachment led them to believe that he was guilty.
He even
His behavior almost implicated him more.
He even gave gifts from Connor's baby shower. He brought Amber Frey's kid, 2-year-old, gifts that he got from the baby shower.
But they never had the baby shower because she went missing before they had it.
Yeah, that's true.
But she had gifts.
They never had it.
But she had gifts.
Yeah,
that
it must
people
have
had
been
given her.
gifts. Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
okay,
she's 8.5
Yeah.
months pregnant. You have received gifts. But yeah, so
How
just
about how his parents got his lawyer? His parents saw
Him on Larry
Mark
King.
Garagos on Larry King saying he was innocent. They're like, that's our guy.
right.
That's our guy. And then Amber gets Gloria Allred
Yeah.
pro bono.
Well, that's what Gloria does.
Mm-hmm.
That's what Gloria does.
Yeah. Listen, I hope he gets a new trial because I kind of want to see more of this. I'm going to read that book, Blood Brother, or he's going to read the other book. So
I'm gonna
maybe
read
we'll
the
have a
other,
part 2 of this.
Oh, we're
already at
definitely
an
going to
hour
have to
and
have a
15.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely will have a part 2 because we need to know like what's going to happen because right now we don't know what's going to happen. You know,
Yeah.
we're getting the DNA testing done on that. We don't have the results of that yet. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens because there's a lot of things we don't know yet. I will also mention that in 2014, another interviewer, this guy Mike, he went and he was doing some investigating and he found the original fire investigator, Brian Spitowski. And when he showed up, the fire investigator said, I've been waiting for 10 years for somebody to show up here.
Really?
Yeah, because of the van. Like that van was never properly investigated. And because he
it
knew.
went on and it got set on fire before they it got set on fire.
Yes.
So now there's no testing it, period.
Well, he did submit samples and
there was a
see,
small
the
area
police-
that still had a blood stain on it that had not been totally burnt.
yeah,
Either
so
way,
they
that
could,
van was
yeah,
participated in some kind of illegal
something happened in that
criminal
van.
behavior. Yeah.
Something happened in that van
yeah.
because not only that, like the last person to drive the van had a criminal record. He was a family member of the owner of the van who was associated with Stephen Todd, and Stephen Todd was one of the burglars that was guilty. Stephen Todd's wife's sister lived next to the house where the van was found burned.
Ugh.
Like it's all connected. Like, and it was never really investigated. And why was the van even burned if it was used in a burglary? Because the owner of the van said they were allowed to use it. So they could have used the van, took the stuff they needed to, and then put the van back the next day. The only reason you burn that van is because there's evidence in it that needs to be destroyed.
Evidence. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the evidence is that I think that Laci Peterson was in that van because there's plenty of people that said that they saw people putting a pregnant woman into the van. Like, how could that have not been brought up? That wasn't brought up.
Right.
You know, like I said, I don't think Scott
And
Peterson's a
then
good
Scott
guy.
saying that those whoever those criminals were had heard already that where he had been his boat,
yes.
so then they brought the body up there and dumped the
Yes.
body. Okay.
Yes, that's their blueprint on how to frame him, how to
Right.
get it, you know,
Right.
or, you know, even like Lori said, maybe the serial killer. Now the serial killer knows where to dump the body too.
Right.
Like there's a lot of things it could be, but we don't know. So we're definitely going to have to do another part to this when we find out more.
For sure.
So I wanted to bring up,
And I
I was going
think-
to ask something and it went right out of my head. Oh my God. I have to start playing the drinking game every time I forget what I was about to say. I drank.
I think that's not going to help anyway. That's going to help you remember.
Although I had 2 drinks and I'm out already. So
so
I
when
don't think I
brought
need a
up,
drinking game to get through my drinks.
no, when I brought up Laci's life insurance policy, I wanted to bring that up because October 2005, Laci's life insurance policy was awarded to her mother. And her mother had actually, her mom had filed a $5 million wrongful death case in regards to her daughter. And then she later, in April 2009, she drops that civil suit.
Who was she filing that against?
Well, you know, just like
Scott?
like when, you know, how that's
You
what,
normally
but that's what O.J. Simpson was found guilty of, just a wrongful death suit. He wasn't found guilty of murder in court, but Nicole Simpson's family filed a wrongful death suit against him. And that's what Laci's mother.
How much was the life insurance policy that she was
Only
awarded?
20
How much was that?
Only $2,500. It wasn't a lot of money. You know,
$2,500.
no, $250,000. Sorry, $250,000.
That makes way more sense.
Yeah. It wasn't.
But
like
that's interesting. Why was it awarded to her? Was it
Because he
awarded
was
to her
found
because he
guilty.
was found guilty?
Yeah.
He was
She said no.
incarcerated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
So if
So she must have been
he's
second.
yeah, so if he's found innocent, she owes him 250.
maybe.
I don't think he'll be going after it.
Yeah, he better just.
But
He better
yeah.
Just sit down.
just sit down.
But did
Scott.
you know, like when you saw him on that Diane Sawyer interview?
Oh, he was a disaster.
He said, "Oh, Laci
He was a disaster on that for
Laci,
sure.
Laci was amazing." She was like, "What was?" Yeah.
No, he was a disaster. Listen, I if he's guilty of anything, it's of being an idiot,
Oof.
being a cheater, being a philanderer, being a narcissist. You know, these are things that we could definitely say he's guilty of. Not being media trained, not being too bright.
Why did he say he would take the first night? He said he would take a polygraph, and then his father talked him out of it.
Yeah,
Well,
his father talked
because
him out
I
of it.
mean, his father talked him out of it because honestly, a polygraph is not, you can't use it in
Conclusive.
court. It's not conclusive. It can't help him in court. It can only hurt him. So why would you take it? I would myself personally, I would never take a polygraph. I would never
Right.
take a polygraph. And to be
Right.
honest with you, from what I've seen, I don't even think I would ever talk to a police officer, to be quite honest with you, without representation, without an attorney, because I watched this. There's this one woman on TikTok. I have to find out her name for you. She's an attorney. And she tells you all the time, like, what happens. And even if you're innocent, she explains to you why you don't talk to the police, because how they twist things around.
Yeah.
So honestly, I don't look at people as guilty for not cooperating with the police, because I have police in my family,
I know.
and there's good police and there's bad police, but you have to protect you.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I don't know that I would ever, I know for a fact I'd never take a polygraph test. I don't know that I would talk to the police without an attorney.
No, I
Right.
would never talk to
Right.
an attorney either.
Even if I'm
Sometimes you
innocent.
don't have a choice, though.
Oh, yes, you have a choice. You
Now, if
absolutely
you're a
have.
juvenile,
You should absolutely have a choice. If you're, yes, you do. You should have
Yeah.
a choice. If you say you want an attorney, they have to respect that. They have to get you an attorney. I mean, the question is, you have to say it.
Right.
right?
So now
You have to say it.
Did anybody know this? Now, when Scott was found at the golf course, he
Mhm.
had MapQuest that was printed
When
out.
was he found at the golf course?
That's
When
where
they
they
went to
arrested
arrest
him.
Oh, that's right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'm sorry.
right.
I'm
I
thinking
should explain.
initially.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He had MapQuest thing printed out, and it was printed out that morning for directions to Amber Frey's workplace.
What?
hmm
I thought you were going to
And
say
there
the
was-
Tijuana.
No. And the later, he was in that later model Mercedes when they found him. That was purchased the day before by his mother. And the reasoning or the supposition behind it is that Mercedes had no tracking. Like it was old enough that there was no, there was no low jack, there was no
Mhm.
tracking.
They couldn't track it, but they were
couldn't
tracking him
track
by his phone. They were tracking him by his phone.
Well,
And
he
the
had
day that he
several.
was-
They had several. He had
Yeah,
several
but the
phones
day
in
that
his
he was
car.
arrested, I'm glad you brought that up because that's something else. The day that he was arrested, he was pulling into that golf course, right? Because he was meeting his brother and his father there. They
Mhm.
found $10,000 in cash, which he had just gotten from his brother because he was selling his brother his truck. They found his brother's ID in there. He was using his brother's ID because his brother lived in the county where they were going to play golf, and it was cheaper for an in-county resident to play golf there. Like, again, I don't know that these are good, but these are reasons. These are reasons that would explain these things.
Right. So now, in regards
Liars
to the
can come
money,
up with lies real quick.
real quick, the thing with the money though is that from the family themselves, they supposedly kept changing their story. Like one thing, it was like what you said, Wendy, with he was going to buy the truck, and then someone
Right.
else in the family said, "Oh no, Scott's mom gave that to him to pay the lawyer," and then somebody else in the family said, that was taken out incorrectly from a joint account, and Scott's mom gave it to him so he could redeposit it. So,
Right.
yeah, who knows?
Exactly. Who does know? Who knows? Right.
So the only way
There's just a
that it was
lot of
somebody-
things.
Yeah. I was going to say the only way is that that I can think of that makes any sense is either a serial killer, either Scott did it himself and he did it the way that that guy said he did it and did it the night before. And when he left in the morning, he just had the dog in the backyard with its leash on and left the gate open. Or, like Wendy said, they knew where to dump the body because of the television coverage.
Yeah.
And the burglars could have been involved.
Right.
Right. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, whoever
Because
was
there could have been
involved
more
knew
than
it.
2 burglars. They only arrested 2. There could have been more than 2. There could have been more
Right.
people involved. Listen, there's theories. So, and we're not going to be able to solve this case today. Sorry to say.
The jury, well, no, the jury's not so.
Our crackpot investigating.
Our crackpot
Yes,
investigator
exactly.
is still out.
I'm gonna read that book, Blood Brother, though. I'm not a
Yeah.
fast reader, though, people. So
That's all right.
All right. So listen, let us know what you think. Put your comments in. We're open to anything. These are just our theories. Again, we haven't made a conclusion. My conclusion is I think that he needs to have another trial.
yeah,
I think we need to get the discovery. I think we need to get the DNA evidence and give him another trial. That's what I think.
I still personally think he's guilty, but I want to see him get a new trial because I want to see them come up with the, use the technology they have now in 2024
Yeah.
to prove it.
What do you think, Laura?
I think he's guilty. I don't have a problem with
Okay.
another trial. It's fucked up. The taxpayers have to pay for it, but I don't have a problem with another trial. But I do think that he's guilty. I do.
Okay.
I just think that there's too much in his background. There's too much in his personality. I just think he did it.
All right.
What do
So
I
we'll
know?
have to wait and see what happens.
I'm some chick sitting in her sun porch in Brick, New Jersey. What the fuck do I know? You know what I mean? What do I know?
Who, by the way, you'll never see because she doesn't
That
want to
you'll
be on
never see.
camera.
I think
So
that needs to
right.
be a
you'll only
check.
hear this chick's voice.
That's
yeah,
right.
exactly. Let me just ask you a quick question. When was the van set on fire?
December
The next
25th.
day from when she went missing? Okay. At that time, would the killers have known that Scott was fishing up in the San Francisco Bay at that point? No. It was
On
only
the
the
20th.
next day.
On
There
the
was no
20th.
media coverage yet.
Yes, but who says that they dumped it then?
But I'm saying, so they had to move her body somewhere else outside of the van to set the van on fire. Then where'd the body go?
Right, until it was
And there's
done.
a lot of movement here.
A lot of movement
Yeah.
there.
I just thought of that.
Okay.
Yeah, we're almost at an hour and a half, man. We gotta.
No one wants to
We
listen
have
to us that long.
We have to land the plane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nobody wants to listen to
Till
us for
next
10
time.
minutes. No less than an hour.
We do, Lord.
If you've made it this long, thank you for watching and listening to We Why
Commend you.
Whenever. I'm Wendy.
I'm Kelly.
And I'm Lori.
Okay.
Come on.
Bye.
Bye.